except that it fell under the protection of Rome. Rome would benefit from Egypt's generosity as the most fertile land in the world. Their common interests, ambition and a common child, of course, linked them together. Both parties saw the benefits of keeping Egypt independent for Caesarion to inherit. Confident of her loyalty to her son if not her, Caesar continued the process of encouraging Cleopatra as the true ruler of Egypt, even when he himself left the country. In 46 BC, Caesar won victory in Rome, a victory that brought the deposed Queen Arsinoe, chained, before the Roman people. Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIV followed Caesar to Rome, and they stayed there for about a year at Caesar's private expense. They were present to witness Caesar giving Cleopatra a golden statue in the temple of Venus Gentrix. They only returned to Egypt when Caesar was killed on March 15, 44 BC. Ptolemy XIV died upon his return to Egypt, and it is not certain whether his death was the result of accident or planning. With no other heir to the throne, Caesarion, who was 3 years old, became Ptolemy XV, and Cleopatra was the only ruler of affairs. The murder of Julius Caesar with the death of Caesar, the trio of Mark Antony, Octavian, and Marcus Lepidus set out to capture his assassins, Brutus and Cassius. Rome intended for general retaliation, and Egypt was called upon to help. And that was very important to Cleopatra. The ruler of Cyprus defected and took the side of the murderers, and decided to return to Sister Arsinoe, who gained her freedom again and lives in Ephesus, to rule Egypt. During her lifetime, Arsinoe would have become a constant threat to Cleopatra, so it was no surprise that she was assassinated at her sister's order in 40 BC. Cleopatra made a wise decision to ally with the trio. It raised a fleet to sail towards Octavian and Mark Antony, but their ships were destroyed by the hurricane. While she waited to equip the second fleet, news came that the assassins had been defeated. 2 men took over, as Octavian ruled the Western Empire, Caesar's legal heir, and Caesar ruled the Eastern Empire. Cleopatra, who was extremely vulnerable in Egypt, needed someone to protect her. And for the first time her instinct betrayed her and made the wrong decision. She decided to ally with Mark Antony. Cleopatra and Marcus Antonius. Map of the lands and territories ruled by Alexandria as a result of it being given by Marcus Antony to Cleopatra and her sons in the year 34 BC. After Caesar's assassination in Rome, the kingdom was divided between his greatest leaders, Octavius and Antony, so Octavius decided to annex Egypt to the Roman Empire, but he had many consequences, among the most severe of which was Marcus Antony, Mark Antony, who wanted to rule the Roman Empire alone, and then Cleopatra thought that she becomes the wife of Marcus Antonius, who may one day rule the Roman Empire, where Mark Antony came to Egypt and Cleopatra came to him in secret for fear of the Egyptians' revolts against her, and she was hiding in a carpet and came out of her in front of Antony as a bride of the sea, and she is in her most beautiful pictures, and Antony fell in love with her. Mark Antony was married to Octavia, sister of Octavius Augustus, and he forbade the Romans to marry a non-Roman. And here a problem arose of his association with Cleopatra and became an ally to her instead of annexing Egypt to the Roman Empire. This was a reason for the enmity between Augustus and Antony, because Octavia was the sister of Augustus. The Roman Empire was divided into East and West, and the East, including Egypt, belonged to Antonius, and it was natural for Cleopatra to become under the authority of the new master Antonius, so she fought him with the weapon of love and beauty, and she did not wait until he comes to Alexandria, but she sailed on a luxurious golden Pharaonic ship from the Egyptian shores, and Antony had sent her request in 41 BC when he arrived in the city of Tarsus in Cilicia, to hold her accountable for her hesitant attitude and her lack of support for Julius Caesar's supporters. Cleopatra admired Antonius not only for his appearance, as he was handsome according to historians, but also for his intelligence, because all expectations at this time confirmed Antonius' victory. Seducing, or allowing herself to be tempted, a Roman leader has served in the past. Cleopatra was still young, and she had no reason to assume her methods would never work again. I decided to bring back history. Antony, who was less intelligent and inexperienced than Caesar, was seduced by her charm. In 40 BC, Cleopatra gave birth to a twin, Cleopatra Selene and Alexander Helios. By the time of their birth, Antony was returning to Rome, where he was to marry Octavia, sister of his ally and archenemy Octavian. Rome could only be ruled by one ruler. The relationship between Octavian and Antony, and thus between Octavia and her new husband, deteriorated rapidly. In 37 BC, Antony left Rome for Antioch, Syria, where he was sent to Cleopatra. Together, they developed a grand plan for an eastern alliance that would restore Egypt some of its former glory. Thanks to Antony, Egypt regained some of its lost eastern lands. Unfortunately, Antony's Parthian campaign, the first step toward strengthening the Eastern Alliance, was a devastating disaster. Instead of acquiring new lands, Antony was forced, through his estranged wife, to beg Octavian for more troops. Antony was offered 2,000 soldiers, which is an ironic number, and their number was also reduced, and relations between them collapsed. Antony's subsequent victory in Armenia restored some of his face. There were intense celebrations in Alexandria, where Antony sat on the throne and boasted of his sons from Cleopatra, as kings of the lands of Rome and occupied Egypt. Nothing displeased Octavian and Octavia more than that. In 32 BC, Octavia was divorced. Antony and Cleopatra became an official couple. But while lovers were enjoying an extended tour of the eastern Mediterranean, Octavian was preparing for war. Battle of Actium. The decisive naval Battle of Actium took place in western Greece in 31 BC and decided the fate of the war. And the Battle of Actium was a victory.